Are you participantes? I'm sharing you. You're sharing this one. I'm not connected to you. I'm connected to you. Don't connect to the MTN router. Not to the MTN router. My high complex 2.0. Connect to
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey,
and go back. Yeah, it's for you. Okay. I need to chair, but if you want to test your presentation, you can stay here and test your presentation. You can see that on the chair. Yeah. I think you can also identify that. Well, we don't have X. We don't have that for this.
It's okay. The sun is yes, the sound from other venues interrupting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Can start. Good afternoon. Can we use the present day?
Yeah, we get much.
Okay.
Good
afternoon, everyone. You are welcome to this panel, African athletes and international sports competitions. In this panel, we have four speakers. The first is Kule Yomi Ebenezer. He will be presenting a paper on redefining Rhodesia's independent status at Munich 1972 Olympics. Nigeria defies the Organization of African Unity. Ejikule Yomi is a doctoral student at the Pan-African Studies Department, University of Lisbon. His research interests cover Nigerian colonial medical history and post-colonial sports in Nigeria. Ejikule Yomi is currently researching on the impact of Nigeria in the Olympics anti-apartheid boycott struggle. And the second presenter, presenting the paper titled "The Atlas Lions in the Global Spotlight: Morocco, Soft Power, and the Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup." That will be by Akinola Elijah and Akinolu Elijah Akinola and Dari Leke Idowu. Akinolu Akinola is a PhD candidate at the Department of Political Science, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. His research interest covers comparative politics and international relations. Akinolu's recent works were published by the Commonwealth Journal of International Affairs and the African Society and the African Affairs and the African Security Review. Dari Leke Idowu is an assistant lecturer in the Political Science and International Relations program of Bowen University. He researches cultural diplomacy, the soft power of African states, and regional power dynamics. Sport and Public Diplomacy in Africa by Tola Benjamin Kehinde. Kehinde Tola Benjamin is a graduate student of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Covenant University. His area of specialization includes diplomacy, climate change, and African studies. The last but not the least, Bright J. Njoku. He will be presenting a paper titled "European Football Capitalism and its Impact on the Fortunes of the African Cup of Nations." He is a doctoral student at the University of Lagos. His research interests include African history, international relations, security, and sports studies. You have 15 minutes to present the paper. The theory presenter, we have 15 minutes. So after that, we throw the floor open. So the first speaker will be Ejikule Yomi Ebenezer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This paper is on the Nigerian boycott of Olympics. And we all know this is boycott Olympics. Where I think it's something that I've been existed for a very long time. But in 1976, after 28 African countries boycotted the Olympics in Canada, to Montreal, Canada, because of New Zealand's interaction with South Africa. Yeah, we also South Africa was a racist country. So because of that, African countries did not want any relationship between the South African government and others. So, besides 1970 Olympic boycott, there have been so many other boycotts before then and after then. But the researchers and scholars have not been really dwelling into all those things. But this research majorly is going to focus on 1972 Olympics. So in 1972, in 1965, majorly Rhodesia, which is now known as Zimbabwe, was also a kind of a racist country that have a white minority trying to dominate the country. In 1965, they declared unilateral independence, and African countries were like, this is not right. How can a minority try to dominate the country? So because of that, they tried to dissociate themselves from the country. So in looking at the history of the Olympics and the IOC, IOC is the International Olympic Committee. IOC is a kind of Western body that tries to accommodate the racist country, the apartheid country. So looking at 1964 Olympics, the IOC tried to invite South Africa to the Olympics. Yeah. So South Africa IOC tried to invite South Africa to the Olympics, even though they've been suspended earlier on. So in this paper, we are trying to look at the threat of boycott by African countries against the invitation sent to Rhodesia to participate in Munich Olympics of 1972. So I said that in 1965, as I said earlier, the country declared independence, and the African countries rejected this idea. In 1969, IOC sent an invitation to Rhodesia to participate in 1972 Olympics. But before then, they asked for the consent of African countries that African countries allow them to participate. The whole discussion took almost 9 hours before African countries were like, okay, if you want to invite them, let's give them some conditions. So one of the conditions they gave them was that they should verify the nationality of the participant. Then secondly, the appointment of inquiry or commission of inquiry to verify the status of the country, if it is truly a colony of Britain or an independent country. And thirdly, they should defer the invitation until when the committee submit the report on their verification. So a committee was set up to look into the issue of the invitation to Rhodesia. And the committee verified that Rhodesia has agreed to become a British colony instead of becoming an independent country. So after the report was submitted, African countries came together and like, if this thing is accepted, let us try to give more conditions to ensure that this country is truly a colony and not an independent country. So they also gave other conditions. The first condition was that the Rhodesian flag must not be host in the Olympic venue, but the British flag as the colonial master to be host for the country. And also, the Rhodesian people should be recognized as British subjects and not as Rhodesian citizens. And another condition was that the team must be multiracial in composition, not just ordinary white people coming to represent the interests of the country. So after this was done, the African countries sent another team to Munich to be sure that all these conditions were adhered to. So after this deliberation, the IOC sent the invitation to Rhodesia and invited them to participate in the Olympics. So African leaders later realized that all the conditions given to Rhodesia was majorly to ridicule the country and make them to be recognized as a colony, not as an independent country. So they were not expecting the country to accept these conditions. They were thinking that the Rhodesian government will turn down the conditions and boycott the Olympics. But to their surprises, Rhodesia accepted the conditions and sent their contingent to Munich. So when the African country realized this, they called for the boycott of the Olympics. So they said that they did not want anything to do with Rhodesia at Munich in 1972. So, but Nigeria was like, if you know that you are not ready to allow this to come to the Olympics, why did you give them a condition initially? They have given them a condition and they have abided by the condition. So there is no reason for you to say that we boycott the Olympics if they participate in the Olympics. So, so at the next Olympic IOC meeting, the African countries came together with other countries and they voted to invite the country to the Olympics. So after all this drama, the whole thing changed, and they were like, they won't allow African countries to participate in the Olympics until when the IOC suspended them from the Olympics. So now Nigeria was like, this country did not breach any of the conditions laid down by the African country, so there is no reason for us not to participate in the Olympics. But all other African countries, we are ready to participate. We are ready to boycott the Olympics. It was only Nigeria and Senegal that were like, we are going by the idea of the Supreme Council for Sport in Africa. The Supreme Council for Sport in Africa, that SCSA, that was the sport body of OAU. But the OAU, as the political body of Africa, said that no African country should participate in the Olympics except Rhodesia is removed from the Olympics. So in this paper, I try to argue that the individual nation countries' policy has an impact on the decision that is being made at international level. So I try to look at this period to a period in the Olympics before this. In 1968 Olympics, Nigeria was very silent in the whole process of boycotting and all that. Because that time also there was also another boycott threat in 1968 in Mexico. In 1968, Nigeria was involved in the Civil War, and because of the Civil War, Nigeria was very, very silent in making any decisions related to international affairs. But in 1972, Nigeria has gained its position, and looking at the foreign policy of Nigeria at that period, Nigeria was ready to make itself as African leader. So that policy was what was directing Nigeria's decision as international affairs. So in 1972, when all this issue was coming up about the boycotting and not boycotting, Nigeria was like, we are not ready to follow the crowd. We are going to stand by our own individual decision. And then looking at the SCSA at that time, it was headed by Nigerian Ibrahim Hodja. Ibrahim Hodja stand that Nigeria should go for the Olympics and not go by the idea of the OAU. So this brings a kind of dichotomy between the sport body of OAU and the political body itself. So as I've said earlier, Nigeria was trying to establish itself as a leader. So because of this, we were not ready to join any general idea or to stand by its own personal decision. So another thing that is also determinant in foreign policy is the issue of economic growth. So looking at Nigeria from independence in 1960 to 1968, Nigeria was involved in so many ethnic issues, ethnic problems. So because of that, the internal problem was enough for Nigeria to solve than engaging themselves in international affairs. So in 1968, also during the Mexico Olympics, Nigeria was in the Civil War. So because of this, all these issues were not really giving Nigeria to have any dominance as a continental issue. But in 1972, Nigeria has already forgotten about the Civil War, and Nigeria has already become a very strong producer of the petroleum. So it has a very strong economic income from petroleum exportation. So this made Nigeria to like, this is the time for us to stand as a giant of Africa, and then we are not ready to go by any idea that does not favor our policy. So, so after all the deliberations on how to join the policy and all that, other countries were accusing Nigeria that Nigeria is a black sheep in Africa by not supporting the interests of other African countries. But the Nigerian leaders were like, we are not like that. This issue is not a political issue, but a sport issue, and we are not ready to support the idea that was being imposed by the OAU. But rather, we are going to support the idea that was being introduced by the Sport Council of Africa, which is the sport body for the country, for the continent. So after so many deliberations, the UNO came on board. We are like, the Rhodesia is not really recognized as a nation. It is still recognized as a colony. So because of that, Germany, as a host nation for the Olympics, should not grant Rhodesia the access to come to the Olympics and present as a nation. And the same thing happened in 1968 when Mexico hosted the Olympics. Mexico strategically tried to remove Rhodesia from participating in the Olympics because they realized that if you participate in the Olympics, the African countries were ready to suffer the Olympics. So after the involvement of the United Nations, the African countries still insisted on boycotting the Olympics, and Nigeria could realize that they was not fighting some unjustified war, and they also plan to join the boycott. So the argument here is just that Nigeria was not ready to support the major opinion of other African countries, but was ready to we are not just a follower, but a leader. So our decision was always sound in everything we do. And it was if not for the involvement of the United Nations, things will have gone out of hand. And by 1976, when another Olympic boycott came on board, Nigeria has already established itself, and Nigeria played a major role in the boycott of the Olympics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker on that is the Atlas Lion in the global sport, Morocco, soft power, and Qatar 2022. You have 15 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to just speak on exploring the soft power potential. That's the idea. Soft power potential of the Atlas Lion in the just concluded FIFA World Cup. The FIFA World Cup being a mega sporting event is beyond the sporting significance, has also been recognized as the ultimate soft power platform. The reason being that at the second largest sporting event in the world after the Olympics, the sporting events command about 3.5 billion viewership every year. And as a result of the mass followers or the large viewers that the World Cup command, as a result of that, it becomes an opportunity for countries to showcase not just their cultural values, but also as an instrument to project their foreign policy aspiration abroad. And from earlier times, even just like the first presenter alluded to, the Mexico 68 Olympic and the Munich 1972 Olympic. The reason why countries want to host such mega events is simply because they want to promote a kind of positive image in the community of nations. And in that sense, we see sport as an instrument of diplomacy. Now, because of that idea, the Eastern literature have always favored the perspective, the ocentric perspective of trying to look at the impact of sport mega events on a country foreign policy, in terms of how they are able to drive tourism, in terms of cultural relation, in terms of branding, and even national pride. But my work take another turn because as a form of bridging the gap in the literature, we are looking at the experience of participating countries. Because beyond being a stage for host countries to showcase their values, the World Cup, even the Olympics, become a site for participating countries to also showcase their values. So the recently concluded 2002 World Cup, one of the most notable, remarkable events in that tournament was the inspiring journey of the Atlas Lion. They were the first African country to reach the semi-final of any international event. And as a result of that, everybody all over the world were just talking about Morocco. And 2 years before that time, I'm sure Morocco did not have the kind of, how will I put it now? The kind of popularity that, or the kind of love that now enjoyed from Palestinian to Israel, it does not enjoy that until after the World Cup. So we want to look at how was Morocco able to leverage on the sporting achievements that they experienced during the World Cup for their soft power game. So the work actually made use of the argument of the work is based on seeing the FIFA World Cup and other sport mega events as a site of diplomacy and soft power projection. Of course, the literature, there are the theories of sport diplomacy. There are two dimensions to it. One is to see sport as an instrument of diplomacy, where countries leverage on sport to achieve their foreign policy objectives. Like the first presenter alluded to, we see that with Mexico trying to host a tournament that is free from controversy, and as a result of that, excluded Rhodesia. We saw that with the Munich Olympic, where African countries saw an opportunity to assert themselves on the international platform by using the Olympic as an instrument of fighting colonialism. So that's one part of the argument. The other part of the argument is also to see that sport in itself is a form of diplomacy. One of the common definitions of diplomacy is to see it as activities that are involving communication, representation, and negotiation that people undertake in the course of interacting with state and non-state actors. With sporting events, we see that at play, where countries, before it's like, for instance, the FIFA World Cup is not a country that will say, I want to host the World Cup. It usually require countries bidding for such tournaments, and the FIFA, as being the dominant sporting body for the World Cup, deciding which country we host. All these things are, there's some sort of politicking that usually involved in this thing. And on its own, that means that sport itself can be categorized as a form of diplomacy. After all, sport people are representing their country. And in the process of representing their country, we see them as ambassadors in tracks, because when they carry out certain activities, they tend to reflect on their own country. So the 2002 World Cup, of course, the dominant perspective is that the Qatar 2002 World Cup was used by the host nation for certain geopolitical objective. But from the perspective of Morocco, Morocco has been able to, the achievement they had by reaching the semi-final gave them an opportunity to launch themselves on the global map, and especially with regard to football. Talking about Morocco, football in Morocco is beyond just sports. Football is also seen as a site of nationalist mobilization. Unlike in Nigeria, where we got our independence relatively cheap with on a platter of gold, for many people in Morocco, the French colonial policy of excluding Africans from playing the game means that the Moroccans, they have to set up their own independent league, different from the league that only the white people can play. From that moment on, clubs like Raja Casablanca and the likes in Morocco, they have this, beyond being a sporting club, they are also seen as a club with which they were contesting against colonialism in their country. So my argument is that Morocco is not really new to the idea of using sport for achieving political objectives. So Moroccan foreign policy in Africa has been marked by the issue of Sahrawi Arab Republic. Ever since Morocco laid claim to that territory in 1975, many African countries opposed it, and it's even the basis by which Morocco decided to withdraw from the OAU as at that time. And in order to, Morocco is until I think 2017 when it came back to African Union. For more than 2 or 3 decades, Morocco was not a member body of the African Union. So how was Morocco able to interact with other African countries? One of the things that Morocco has been able to do is to use what is called football diplomacy, where it tried to use its advanced football infrastructure to engage with other African countries. One of the recent developments is I think in the 2002 World Cup qualifier, There are some African countries like Liberia that do not have their pitch is not up to FIBA standard. And one of the things they all requested for was that they wanted to use the Moroccan pitch for their, what's it called, for their qualifying matches. To me, that is a recognition on the part of other African countries about the superiority, or should I say, the advancement that Morocco has made in terms of football infrastructure. And Morocco has been able to use this form of football diplomacy to undercut or to complement his inability to engage with other African countries from the former mechanism of the African Union. So the World Cup, one thing, the idea of soft power is based on, is a form of, in international relation, it talks about how a country is able to enjoy the attraction, admiration, and aspiration of other countries in such a way that it's doing so through sheer attraction and not through force. One of the things that Morocco was able to do through the World Cup was that before the World Cup, Morocco did what was kind of strange in the Arab world when it recognizes, when it tried to restore diplomatic relations with Israel. And that in the Arab world was seen as a kind of betrayal. But during the World Cup, you see Moroccan players holding Palestinian flag. And what they were doing is that they were displaying their solidarity with Palestine, when just 2 years before, their government actually restored diplomatic relations with Israel based on that same Palestinian movement. And you see Palestinians, other African countries supporting Morocco. And to me, that's an indication that they have been able to leverage on that their sporting success to actually remove some of the negative effects of their foreign policy in Africa. And lastly, during the semi-final between France and Morocco, many people do not know that before that match, there was this diplomatic tussle between Morocco and France. But because of that game, because of the symbolism of that game being the first African country to reach semi-final, the president of France and the king of Morocco came to Qatar to watch the game together. So what that demonstrated was that the Moroccan government, I don't know whether, of course, it's possible that that could be the result of underground diplomatic negotiation. But the fact that they choose to come to use that platform to come and tell the world about the fact that they are restoring their diplomatic relation actually shows that Morocco has been able to take advantage of its success at the tournament for its foreign policy objective. So in that sense, we can actually measure the impact that Morocco has, the Moroccan government has been able to leverage on its success for foreign policy objective. Then lastly, the Moroccan players themselves, because the work is based on two theories. One is to see sport as an instrument of diplomacy. The other is to regard sport as a form of diplomacy itself. So we want to interrogate how the Moroccan players have been able to represent their countries in the way they are able to project their national values and identity. And one of the ways they do this is, you see, at the beginning of every game when they score, you see the players praying on the pitch, communicating to the rest of the world about their Islamic identity. And also, there was a debate about whether are they Africans or Arabs. And you see the way the Moroccan coach was able to diplomatically show that they were both Arabs and Africans. And as a result of that, they were able to get the support, or should I say, the admiration of countries all over the world, because almost all African countries are now seeing them as an African country because of their success in the World Cup. Other Arab countries are also seeing them as Arab country. Now, in summary, because the work is half done, the essence literature tend to favor a kind of narrative that look at the ocentric approach when it comes to sports mega events. But by looking at the perspective of one of the participating countries and how such a country has been able to leverage on its success for diplomatic gains, we believe that at a time that African scholars are beginning to employ the utility of soft power, that the work we actually will contribute to the emerging literature on soft power, sports mega events, and even African diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Let's get the sport and diplomacy Bola Benjamin.
Okay. Good day, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good day, everybody. My name is Kede Tola. My topic is sports and public diplomacy in Africa. Yes, I can hear you. Okay. Okay. Public diplomacy is a strategic communication and engagement process employed by nations to foster mutual understanding, build relationships, and promote their values and interests in the international stage. There are a set of strategies in which countries establish or utilize to improve their image in the international scene. In recent years, sports has emerged as a powerful instrument in which public diplomacy efforts has been used to improve their image. Sports possess a unique ability to transcend borders, cultures, and languages, capturing the attention and interest of people of diverse backgrounds. By leveraging sports, countries can enhance their soft power, which refers to the ability and influence to the ability to influence others through attraction and persuasion rather than the use of military means or coercion. This paper is anchored on the soft power theory developed by Joseph Nye, which suggests that countries' influence and attractiveness in the international scene can be derived from its culture, values, and policies rather than solely relying on military activities. In the context of Africa, this theory can be applied to examine how sports as a cultural expression and national passion can serve as a soft power tool to shape perception and enhance the diplomatic image of the African continent. Sports play an important role in public diplomacy, and one of which is to improve the image of a country. The second is to use as a soft power tool to exert influence without force. Another is through national identity. Sports often serve as a reflection of a country's values, traditions, and identity. Athletes become symbols of national pride and unity, rallying the entire nation behind them and reinforcing the sense of collective identity. Also, there's also the economic dimension to sports and public diplomacy. It allows countries to gain wealth through the immense investments, sponsorships, as well as merchandise that occur when they host sporting events. Also, there's also the cultural exchange dimension, which brings about people from diverse backgrounds and communities to a particular country. It's crucial for countries to strategically leverage on sports to strengthen their diplomatic relations, to build positive perceptions, and to achieve their national objectives. By investing in sports and sporting athletes, countries can reap the multiple benefits that extend beyond the realms of sports itself. And another dimension of sports involvement in public diplomacy can be seen in the aspect of citizen diplomacy, which refers to the activities and actions of individuals abroad. This also means the activities of athletes. Athletes become ambassadors of their country. They promote the country's image abroad. Good examples are sports stars or athletes like Didier Drogba. When Didier Drogba is in London, for example, every positive attribute of Didier Drogba on and off the pitch is seen as a positive attribute of that of Ivory Coast. And this also can be reflected on other African athletes that ply their trade abroad. Also, there's also the unifying aspect of sports in the international scene. And the first speaker mentioned that of Pan-Africanism when Nigeria and some other African countries boycotted the Olympic Games. That shows the ability of sports message at the international scene. And in recent times, we've been seeing the anti-racism movement by some sports stars. About a month ago, we saw that of Vinicius of Real Madrid, where he was able to make an anti-racism movement in Madrid. There's also the grassroots impact. Sports stars and athletes kind of like create or beam spotlights on communities within the continent, communities that might never have been heard of before, but because of some sports stars or athletes come from those regions, they're able to beam a spotlight of attention to such communities. So through their talent, dedication, and sportsmanship, athletes become influential figures who can bridge divides, promote cultural understanding, and foster connections between nations. Their actions both on and off the field have the potential to shape diplomatic relations and promote citizen diplomacy, making sports a powerful force in public diplomacy efforts. And there are some practical examples, one of which is the 2010 South African World Cup, which South Africa hosted as the first African country to host such. The tournament was able to make South Africa rebrand themselves from the decades and years of apartheid and to reposition themselves in the international scene. Also in recent times, we've seen the African Cup of Nations and other events like the Athletic All African Games that have been hosted by different African countries. Okay, and another dimension of it is the aspect of cultural diplomacy, one of which can be seen in the hosting of some tournaments in Africa, the opening and closing ceremonies in which African countries can show their cultures, their values, their history on the hosting days and also on the closing ceremony. Another example is also the Sahara Marathon, which I think the second speaker talked about. It's a sporting event which is held annually by the Shari refugee camps in Morocco. This marathon brings together athletes from around the world to participate in solidarity with the Shari people, raising awareness about their struggle for self-determination. The event serves as a powerful example of how sports can be used to promote cultural understanding, to support marginalized communities. Another example is that of the Nile Basin, in which communities around the river now come together sometimes to engage in sporting activities. This builds about cooperation and collaboration amongst these countries. These examples highlight how sports events and initiatives in Africa promote cultural diplomacy by celebrating diversity, raising awareness about social issues, and fostering cross-cultural understanding. Through the integration of sports and cultural elements, Africa leverages a rich heritage to strengthen diplomatic relations and promote positive perception on the continent. However, there are some hindrances to achieve this, using sports to achieve public diplomacy, one of which is lack of infrastructure, which is a problem for most African countries. Another is financial constraints, as most countries rather prioritize their wealth on other pressing national issues than investing in sports. And another one can also be seen in the aspect of socio-political crisis in countries that suffer from security risks or insecurity, as some may say. In conclusion, the potential of sports and public diplomacy in Africa is immense. By capitalizing on the successes and addressing the challenges, sports can be used to improve the image and brand of a particular country. However, there should be increased strengthening partnership amongst countries within the African continent. Also, there should be investment in sporting infrastructure so that sports can be used to upgrade or elevate the image of a particular country. Also, there should also be a rebranding of sports in some way that sports can also cover things beyond sports itself and focus on areas like gender equality and to promote education. And also, by implementing these steps and continuing to explore the innovative approaches, Africa can unlock the full potential of sports as a catalyst for public diplomacy, cultural exchange, and economic growth, as well as social development. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
The next speaker, last but not least, the Bright European Football Capitalism and the impact on the forces of the African combination.
Especially as it has to go with the European football capital. We all know that in recent times, football has become global. Big business and it has attracted some of the richest in the society to buy up European clubs. This over time has altered how this club are managed, how players are released to national teams, and how they are allowed to participate in national team competition, especially the African Cup of something happened at the first few years of the 1990s. Two things. First, there was a rebranding of the English game. from the English national team to the Premier League. The Premier League. That brought in a lot of investment, popularity all over the world, and forward. Secondly, was also the creation of a new continental competition in Europe, known as the Champions League, in 1994. These two things changed the way football is run in Europe, the way club treat countries, and the way players are released to their national team. In the context of Africa, we have poorly managed leagues that are barely able to pay players living wages. So as a result, we have a continuous migration of African players, the best of them, to European, not only European leagues, some obscure leagues in everywhere, Asia, South America, and everywhere. Because of this, it has affected the remnants, the quality of the remnants in African leagues. And where some of these places they go to, some of them becomes world beaters, star players, so crucial to their teams, such that you can't name a first 11 without having these African players. But how has this affected our continental championship, the African Cup of Nations? First held in 1957 in Sudan and won by Egypt. The championship has grown and become one of the best in the world. The 33rd edition was just played in Cameroon, won by Senegal. But we discovered that many of these players are either not allowed to participate in this tournament, or they don't give their best in this tournament. Why? These players are paid huge salaries at the club side, and they are manipulated by managers in most occasions not to come to camp, as at Wednesday. And don't forget that we have a FIFA rule which says that any invited player must report to camp 10 days before any tournament. But do we follow this rule? No. How do they go about it? They manipulate these players to either say they are injured and won't be able to come to for the tournament. Sometimes, even when they sluggishly release these players, they come back to pick these players when the tournament is in progress to go play for them and bring them back. In 1992, or just 90, Yusuf Fofana and Stephen Keshi arrived barely 24 hours before the tournament. In, I think, 2018 or thereabout, Efe Ambrose has to shuttle between Super Eagles camp and his club in Scotland. So this, some moves gingered by excessive capitalism to make profit over players and have them play for them, even when they are on national team assignment, has affected the quality of AFCON. So much so that it's either teams don't present their best players, or their best players are not even willing to play as they should, because they are much more committed to clubs where they earn more wages. Football, generally, especially as it has to do with Africa, has received some of the least attention in scholarship, especially as it has to do with Africa, especially Africa. We have just few works on Africa. So there is a huge gap of knowledge about how European capitalism, excessive capitalism, affects the African Cup of Nations. And what can the African leagues, various countries, what can they do to retain not just their best players, but to also invest highly in their league so that they can retain these players? The point is that as far as rich individuals in society, the Qatar guys from Asia, are coming in to buy European clubs, they will continue to invest huge sums of money. Players from across the world, especially Africa, will continue to be attracted. And if we don't if we don't do a countermeasure to retain these players, they are going to continue to go out. There is an argument that football was created by the poor and has been stolen by the rich. This is based on the point I mentioned earlier, the coming, into football by the rich guys. We need investors in Africa, people like Dangote, the Otedolas, to go into football, buy local clubs, Enyimba, 3SC, and the likes, buy local clubs, retain homegrown talent, so that we'll be able to not just counter what Europe has achieved, but to also develop the sort of market value, the capital share in global football, and have it in Africa. Another argument is that Africa can also permanently change the timing of AFCON. Currently, it's in January. The last one was held in January in Cameroon. The next one will also be held in January 2024 or in Cote d'Ivoire. We can alter this timetable, align with European calendar, and hope for the best. This work argues that Africa can better manage its talents. Africa can better host tournaments, especially AFCON, that will not only showcase the best of the talent, but also showcase the cultural value for which Africa is known for. Because of the death of extant literature, I have spoken to people who are involved in the game, ex-players, national team coaches, top journalists across Africa, the football fans, and the rest of them. No doubt, playing in Europe has helped hone the talent in Africa. You see some African players, when they are playing in local league, you could barely watch their performance. They just concluded the top 6 in Nigeria. It's not the best of football. Once they go to Europe, play under some of the best managers, use some of the best facilities, they're able to hone their talents and come good. We had Didier Drogba, JJ Okocha, Sadio Mane, Mohamed Salah, and the rest. So the argument is that you cannot have a globally followed league if you don't have the equipment. You don't have the technical ability of coaches, top coaches, who regularly update their knowledge about the game. You can't compete with leagues that are known all over the world without these facilities. Conclusion. African players occupy important places in global football, especially at the level of European clubs. Last AFCON, the coach of Liverpool was almost weeping because they had to lose some of his top players. So these players earn the best wages. They are the top of their game. But we regularly bring them back to Africa to play for their team. How has this country tapped into the popularity of these players? Osimhen, for instance, how have Nigeria leveraged on the software diplomacy that these players command? We haven't done the best. And my recommendation would be that African leagues should attract investments. Have better equipment, football pitches, so as to be able to retain some of our top talent. We should also, like I said earlier, try to align AFCON calendar with the European League. We start in August, September, and end in May the following year. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Alexander. It's time to throw the floor. If you have any questions or questions, about the paper that you presented. Okay.
That's I'm very, I'm not what is what's
Para, you please introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Oneomotola. Nickname is
Motola.
Omotola is Slovan to the best. Yeah, what I want to ask that I don't be very practical. Don't go I know how far they have, how they are changing the lives of Africans. And I'm not trying to be practical. Is it difficult to be told African calendar maybe to have like African calendar with European? What I'm thinking that, but I know that sounds very lofty, like a very lofty, very high idea. But I'm thinking of if you want to actually compete, it might be too high to start from that. The first thing is why don't we have think of policies to actually go out for very well. Then it's when people are now old, like are now start thinking and changing. I feel like that maybe that's like because our most our state. So I feel that if you are looking at what are the things that you can do right now, changing the African calendar. In fact, I think you just go like I said, because people will know people are even mind, all everyone is playing, they are in work. So they are not seeing the whole thing like that. What I think, something how can we actually integrate our sports? Because we play now, they are the ones the Africans are dominating. No, they're not they are not dominating and they are doing so well there. So what are the things that we can do? What are the policies that we can do? In our own history, to go to become the very lofty. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the. And I like you said before you. I think what was trying to say is that we should at least like bring African football to a certain stage, in which we can compete or debate or influence what's going to happen in to our football. And our football is not keeping a level where we can dictate what's going to happen. This has been our relationship with the Europeans or the European league that they are that things to like develop our league, solve the elementary challenges of African football, even before even thinking of looking the Europeans in the eye and tell us this is what we want and this is what we don't want. I don't know if I'm speaking your mind. So okay, the question like was directed to him.
Yes.
Thank you for your question. I so much love it. But aligning African calendar with Europe, especially AFCON, simply means making sure we start our league at the same time. That's September, August, September. Then end at the same time, which is May, usually May. What that does is that it allows the clubs to go on holiday at the same time. You know, unlike the current situation where their league is on, then you are playing a tournament in Africa, which means they cannot use their African players to play the league, and you need them for the same tournament. So it's a clash of interest. But aligning the calendar means that we start the season the same time and it ends the same time, like what we have done this year in Nigeria. Our league has just ended, and we are going to start by, I think, next month. So what that does is that we'll now have the same calendar with Europe. We can start the league at the same time, then end at the same time. It will allow for us to host our continental championship at the same time without hindrance. About developing the game in Africa, it's needed, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Apart from South Africa, where they're doing quite a lot. Sub-Saharan Africa in general, we don't have the best of league, especially as it has to do with managing interruption, here and there. Nigeria league, sometimes it's suspended for a whole, 6 months, court cases here and there, it affects the football on the pitch. Politics is another thing, and the ability to pump money into this league
is also another. Thank God the new league management body in Nigeria is already doing this. Winning by 100 million just last month by winning the league. The previous winner got 0 naira. So these are some of the things that will bring our league not at par with Euro, but at least start competing with other leagues. Thank you.
Before we attend to Matthew Ayodele, Ayodele, Samson. So,
conditions in January. It's because of weather condition. If you study African football very well, you see that they usually play it January because most African countries witness heavy rainfall in June. So it is a no-no. We cannot play African Nations Cup in June. Forget about it. It will never happen. If it happens, they will keep destroying. The Nations Cup will not be completed. Look at the one in, I think, maybe Cameroon or something. They played one in June. It wasn't a good tournament because of heavy rainfall. That's why they usually play in January. That is that about that. While we are growing up, especially in Nigeria, I knew Abiola Babes, Leventis, which other, I think, we have private clubs, I mean, in Nigeria, while I was growing up. And we have a competitive league in Nigeria, Julius Berger. So we have investors in the Nigerian league in the 90s. So for me, I think the problem here is our government, their policies. They didn't encourage investors to invest in our league. Look at what Saudi is doing now. The Europeans are scared because Saudi is ready to invest $620 billion in their own sports. So the problem came from our government, not anything else, but government is the problem. Our policies are very poor. Dangote should own a club. Otola should own a club. It's a normal thing. They should own a club. They should sponsor our league. That's how it should be run. Thank you.
So in my recent research on sport in Nigeria, especially the Nigerian soccer league, I realized that sponsoring all these clubs are not the issue, but the corruption in the system, right? I work on some sports issue in the 70s. I realized that in the early 80s, Abiola Babes and Leventis that you mentioned, the two of them withdrew their support from those teams, and the teams were disbanded because of the issue of corruption. How can a company or an individual be sponsoring the team, and after winning a tournament, there is nothing to show for it? So it's not make any sense. So that was why in 1983, I think, when Abiola Babes won the league, and they were to represent Nigeria in the continental event, they were expecting some support from the NFA as being the league winner, but there was no money to sponsor them to continental event. There was no money to even give to the players. So it was like, how would I be investing my money in a team that there will not be anything to show for it at the end? So that was the issue with Nigerian football generally. The people in the administration were not ready to get support from outsiders. Besides, even if they are calling for support, the way they are managing the money is not encouraging more people to come into the system and they give them some financial support. And it will remain like that till when there is a change in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ejikule. I think let's go online. Is it Matthew Ayodele?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes,
Matthew.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the presentations. Very enlightening. So my first question goes to Mr. Ejikunle, talking about Rhodesia and sports politics in the second half of the 20th century. And knowing the imperial origins of sport, right, and how it actually reflected the racial divide in broader Rhodesian society, and the fact that Rhodesia was actually at that point was a white state, controlled. Was a white state controlled. And the population, the opportunities for Black population, even in Rhodesia, was quite marginalized. And also like thinking more about the fact that sports during this time in Rhodesia, or generally in the international scene, was an arena of contested control between blacks and white. My question, I then wonder, like, how does the Rhodesia, circumstance actually speak to South African, circumstance in the international community at that period? Like, do you think one actually influences the other, in terms of, the racialization of body also going on in the, South African, sports scene at this period? Or I'm just curious to know, like, do you think like probably South African, circumstance also influenced, the sports politics in Rhodesia, even at the international level? Or, which do you think influences the other? And, what do you think are the, nexus between, the South African, sports politics at this period, and then, the circumstance in Rhodesia as well, right? Because like when we think about it, these, two, spaces are actually, settler colonies, space, right? So also, how can we like, understand this nexus for us to think more, about how racial divide actually, facilitated this marginalization of, Black people in participation in sport at this period. I don't know if my questions, I hope you get the question.
Yes, yeah.
Then, yeah, thank you. Then my second, question goes to the two presenters with very, impactful presentation on sport as diplomacy. I wonder, because like according to Maria and Geoffrey, right, they suggest that diplomatic representation and communication actually serve as an unofficial venue of contact, right, among influential non-governmental actors beyond boundaries of this official representation and things like that. So I wonder if sport diplomacy, the way you've both talked about it, actually transcend this border of state relationships, and actually goes to the border of non-state relationship, right? When you think about individual official decision can actually in a way have a positive or negative effect on on sport diplomacy itself. So I'm saying like we can actually think, if we think beyond this state bodies, right, when it comes to sport diplomacy, how does individuals also influence this diplomacy at this in this space of contact, right? So if we think about how individual influence this, then we can also think about how statement is expressed by individuals, probably people representing the state, but representing the state, but also pursuing their own respectability, how their own decision have also influenced the nation's image. And not just because like when we're talking about state relations, when we're talking about foreign diplomacy, we are also talking about how individuals that actually occupy certain spaces also pursue their interest and respectability. So just thinking about that and thinking through more of that. Then the third question I have, which is not just a question but more or less like a comment, is on this issue of
switch the question, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Just a comment that, yeah, manipulation of players, sport talent drain and complex problem of national responsibility. I think some other factors that have actually contributed to the issue of marginalization of sport in Africa. Actually, when you're talking about, okay, sorry, I think I'll just leave you at that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew Ayodele. Excuse me. Is Lorna Kimayo ready to ask a question? Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me. All right. Please introduce yourself. Tony. Tony Osoya. Okay.
So if you are the mandate,
Okay. You said FIFA has a mandate that players have to report back 10 days before the events at the camp or the base, wherever they have been. As the government itself try to, liaise with the clubs, probably just a comment from you, work with the club about the need for the players to be back home for the cup and everything. I just want to hear your comment about that.
Thank you. Thank you for publishing that. About the release of player, which is generally known. These clubs are able to manipulate, not just the players, but even the FA. This is what they do. They will ask the players that we need you against Man City next week. You can't be in AFCON. Tell your country, your FA, that you are injured. Right? They have done it to several players. Those players will cooperate. Oh, I'm injured. I can't play. I can't give my best at AFCON. Right? They will stay. Then 2-3 days later, you see them against Man City. Right? It's not as if this law is not existing, but they find a way to navigate. In fact, you have to pay a fine if you use the player while he was supposed to be at the national team. You have to pay a fine, which FIFA made very clear. So, but they have a way of manipulating. Either the manager, they could reach out to the manager and say, oh, we know this is a very important player to you, but could you allow us to use him during this period? We'll do so and so. And the manager will say, okay, it's important to us, but I have replacement. He can stay. There are several players this has happened to. Barcelona came to pick Samuel Eto'o during AFCON to go play matches, I think, against Real Zaragoza or so. So there are several examples of this guys manipulating the rule to suit them because of the financial power, capital.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Tokunbo Salako. Yeah. I also want to speak about the last paper. Sir, I think the paper is an interesting paper, and there is a lot that can be getting from the paper. But I feel that there are many information that you miss from it, like the information he explained to us, that the reason why many African nations cannot host the Nations Cup in June is because of weather. I feel we should have that in the paper. Then also, there have been a time whereby the African Nations Cup was hosted in June. Yeah, so there should be a reason. I also feel that that should have been said. And why is it that the subsequent editions are not happening in June? So I feel this can be in paper. Also, about African players being manipulated by their club. There is a FIFA rule now. Yes, there are ways that clubs influence players, but some players on their own, they also feel, I don't want to go to represent my country now, and I want to represent my club. And there have been examples of such players too. So I feel that will also add good points to the paper. Example is Joe Matip from, I think, Cameroon, that said he decided to stay with Liverpool while African Nation Cup was going on. So these examples put beautiful credit to the paper. I believe it is an interesting paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In time, like I said, CAF has found a way to align the timing, which is now May, June. But the last one edition and the coming one were shifted because of the factor you mentioned, rain. Cameroon made a request to CAF that the rain will be merged by June, that they should shift it. And because has also made that request. But the official CAF position now is that June, July, AFCON will come up June, July, every edition of AFCON. Then about players voluntarily withdrawing. Yes, so many of them. It also has to do with the way we treat players. Celestine Babayaro, Wenga Okunowo, Olize, brother, many of them played at Sydney 2000. Up to this day, Celestine is yet to get his return tickets. Not the bonus, the money he used to flying from London to Australia to play. He's yet to get it from NF. So many examples of FA not fulfilling their promises. They will tell you should have enough joy that you are representing the country. You shouldn't ask for money. So that's why most players will rather withdraw, play for a club that will take care of them if they are injured. There are so many players that have gotten injured in national team assignment and they are abandoned by the FA. So issues like this make players to prefer the club to the national. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Ejikule Yemeluza, I need to respond to what you
Matthew's question is on the relationship between Rhodesia and the South Africa on the issue of the racism. So that's a very vital question because the problem in South Africa influence the decisions of Africans against Rhodesia. So looking at the role of Africa in this issue of a boycott, the boycott did not really start in 1968 or 1972. It has been something that has been consistent from 1960s when African countries started getting independence. From their independence, they have been more prominent in advocating for Africa's boycott of Olympics whenever there are issues of racism. In 1964, when South Africa was suspended from the Olympics, the IOC has always been a kind of a pro-Western body, even though it should be a kind of world body that taking interest of everybody. But their interest has always been to support the Western world against African interests. And then before the 1960, when Africa started being independent, IOC was like every country should have a representative in the IOC. But due to the large number of African countries in the independent in IOC, they tried to reduce the number. I think throughout 1960, there was only 7 countries from Africa that were members of IOC. So my point here is that the issues happening in South Africa influenced African positions on Rhodesia. In 1972, in 1968, when Mexico hosted this Olympics, Rhodesia had already declared their policies, their laws on racism, that some equipment was used by only black, some by only white. But the Africans were like, until when they make it formal, before they can try to make their protest known. But luckily for African countries, the medical countries that hosted the Olympics tried to sideline the Rhodesian participants from coming to the Olympics by having issue, by creating issue for them in getting their visa to the country. So logically, the issues in South Africa influence African decisions to quickly tackle the issue of racism in Rhodesia before it became a major issue like that of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Kind introduce yourself. Chino Zoria.
The question I had for the first speaker is, you mentioned that Nigeria had to boycott the Olympic because of what happened to Rhodesia. So I want to know, was there any kind of relationship between Nigeria and Rhodesia between that period, maybe economic relation, political or social relationships between Nigeria? Was it just because of they feel that the way the Rhodesia was treated was not fair, and they just decided that they're going to boycott that can be the 1972 Olympics? That's my question. And I also have a question for the second speaker that spoke about soft power and diplomacy and something like that. What I want to ask is, I knew that in that 2022 World Cup, Morocco was able to go to the semi-final. So I want to ask, was it that it was because of the soft power diplomacy that was why Morocco was able to go through to up to the semi-final? Or I just want to know. I'm just trying to just think aloud, or what? Because was it because of what the soft power diplomacy that was why Morocco was able to project or try to project themselves to the semi-final? Or was it because of the fitness or any other reason about the player or something like that? Thank you very much.
Can you take the question again?
Thank you. My name is Oludare Musumola. Yeah, my question is to the second speaker. I just wanted to know why Morocco? Because before now, we have seen some African countries that did some heroic performance in World Cup. You know, Cameroon 1990, yes, Senegal, even defeating their colonial master in 2002, Ghana in 2010. So what is the interest? Why Morocco? what did Morocco do that is different from these African countries, or did all these African countries that I mentioned did not utilize that leverage, to enhance their foreign policy, as it were? Thank you.
Okay, really thank you for the question. So looking at the issue of a boycott, Nigeria's role and Rhodesia. So the reason why Nigeria did not really support the boycott initially was not because Nigeria had a very special rapport, special interest in Rhodesia. This is about national interest. And national interest at that period was that Nigeria was trying to make a name on the continent, that we are African giants. We are not just to follow everything that the OAU told us to do, right? At that period, before you have understanding of that, you look at what happened before this period. Throughout the 1960s, Nigeria was having having internal issues. So issue of ethnicity that led to the coup d'etat, through to the civil war and all that. So throughout all this period, Nigeria was in Nigeria's foreign policy. It was claiming that Africa as central piece of Nigeria foreign policy, but in reality, Nigeria was not really acting to that name because of the issues that were happening internally. But in the same thing in 1968, that was when the civil war was in place. But in 1972, Nigeria had already overcome all this issue of internal issues. So they were like, this is the time for us to make our interests known, make our name established on the continent. So that was why they did not really support anything that came to their way. They have to look at it within themselves that, do we need to support this issue? That does it worth supporting? So if OAU say we support this issue, if it doesn't favor us as a nation, why should we go by it? So that was the reason why they were not ready to support the boycott at the initial stage. Not that they had any good rapport with Rhodesia. And the same thing happened in 1968 also. 1968, when other countries tried to boycott the Olympics, when South Africa was re-invited to the IOC, Nigeria was just quiet throughout the whole process. Nigeria just remained quiet, no communication, even when they went to the meeting of SCSA in Brazzaville, Congo. When they came back, they were like, it's only the SCSA that can determine Nigeria's stand. But when the SCSA stood that Nigeria must boycott, or Africa must boycott the Olympics, Nigeria did not boycott the Olympics until when there were so many meetings internally. Because by that period, nobody wanted to commit Nigeria to another external war. So they have to meeting of internal people, different ethnic groups coming together that should we support this boycott or we just try to let it go? So the reality is that it's not about personal interest with Rhodesia, but about national interest with Nigeria and the international world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ejikunle Ebeneza. Okay, let him answer it. Sure. Okay.
Well, the first question that was directed at me, initially, my first response was that that's a straightforward answer. We all know that excelling at the World Cup has nothing to do with politics. It's more has to do with the preparation, the level of talent at your disposal, and even to some extent, how to develop your local leagues are. So the success that Morocco enjoyed at the World Cup has nothing to do with the politics of Rabat, but it has more to do with how the talents that they have at their disposal. But the argument of the work is how the Moroccan government, the officials, are able to take advantage, leveraging on that success at the World Cup to push for certain foreign policy objectives of trying to win out the mind of the Arab world, of trying to engage further with other African countries. So they are able to do this because they already have a strategy of football diplomacy. Okay, they already have that strategy, but the success was what they leveraged on, and they were able to leverage on that success because of the well-developed strategy of football diplomacy that they have at their disposal. So the second question, why Morocco? Well, when Cameroon got to the quarter-final, well, there wasn't, I'm not aware of course, there could be, but in terms of the significance was that it was the first African country And even Nigerian in the 1994 World Cup, some people have argued that, some scholars have argued that that was what led to the increase in the number of African teams going to the World Cup. It used to be 1 before, it was increased to 2, but after 1994, it was increased to 5. So some people have argued due to that. But I think today, no other African country has well-developed system of football diplomacy as Morocco. Morocco has this strategy of trying to undercut or complement its foreign policy by using football as a strategy of winning hearts and minds. And because of that, that's why I said, okay, we can see how the government is even trying to leverage on that success. Nigeria, on the other hand, maybe when we won the Olympic, we were under the military rule of General Sani Abacha, that whose foreign policy was kind of his area boy kind of foreign policy. Maybe we were not able to leverage on that success. Maybe that's what happened to Morocco. But with what happened to Senegal too. But with Morocco, we are seeing a deliberate adoption of soft power tools. Okay, Nigeria has a lot of soft power resources. We have the musician, we have Afrobeat, but our government leveraging on it for foreign policy objectives? No. But you see, Morocco, on the other hand, they are leveraging on that success for foreign policy objectives, and that is what attracted my attention to that.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So I
remember I didn't really watch thinking. I watched it like in Britain. I think remember there was this thing that I read they were like slow African. There was this I was reading through the paper, then I felt like it was actually Africans felt that Morocco was more inclined to the Arab world. But that was there was this argument, is Morocco African or was this Arab? So can you just like I said, I think I read something like that.
The interesting thing about Morocco is that there are some even the kind of Arab that they speak in Morocco is the one that is seen as vernacular or pidgin. So the Arab they speak in Morocco is kind of in ranking. It's even like our inferior form of Arabic. So many Moroccans do not even speak the Moroccan version of Arabic. So, and don't forget that we have Jews too in Morocco. And because they are located in Africa, they play under CAF. As a result of that, we see them as African. But of course, many North African countries also regard themselves as Arab. Of course, that actually led to the debate that were they Africans? And you see the way the Moroccan players and the coach especially try to manage that situation by identifying as Africans and identifying as Morocco. And even then, there is one interesting that the Moroccan coach did. He was conducting the interview in the Moroccan version of Arabic, which many people regarded as inferior, and which back home, many people were hailing that move that, okay, now our own language too is now being elevated, so to say, at the international stage.
Thank you very much. I have my own observation. Well, first of all, let me comment on writing Njoku's paper on European migration on African migrations to European leagues. 5 minutes. If you are looking at the effect or the impact of the migration of African players to major European leagues, we need to engage the fortune of African players themselves. At times, they bear the brunt of this European capitalism. I remember when Kanu Nwankwo went to Arsenal from Inter Milan in 1999, thereabouts. He was the leading scorer of Arsenal, scoring hat-trick. He later became African Footballer of the Year 1999, but he went to AFCON, that in Nigeria, through Lagos. And before he went back to Arsenal, Thierry Henry, as a Wenger has already bought Thierry Henry, Kanu lost his place in Arsenal, and that was the beginning of the end or decline of Kanu's career at Highbury. So we need to look at the players there to bear the brunt of this Europeans of this migration to Europe. Another thing is that we have to be dispassionate about Europeans exploits in Europe. We often look at the negative effects it has on African leagues that the skilled African league, like our best, are moving to Europe. What about us looking at it in this angle? When they go to Europe, they get exposed to the nitty-gritty of modern day football. Like in my paper that I'm going to present tomorrow, I argue that it was when African players began to move to major European leagues. That was when we began to play a significant role in global events. That was when African countries began to show some level of like upsets in the World Cup. Cameroon qualified for the quarterfinal stage at the Thailand 1990 World Cup. Look at the squad of that indomitable Lions of Cameroon. They were majorly playing in the European League. When Senegal defeated France, their colonial lord in 2022, like 98 or 99% of Senegalese players were playing their trade in the French league. In the 1970s, we had one of the best leagues in Africa, if not the best league. The likes of Segun Odegbami, Adoke Amesimaka, Felix Owolabi, Kunle Awesu, and the rest. And we couldn't secure a World Cup ticket until we had this migration of Nigerian players to Belgium, to Denmark, to Portugal, to Holland in the early 90s. And that was when we secured our first World Cup slot. I don't know if you are getting me. So if you are engaging Africa's migration to Europe, we need to be dispassionate about it. We need to balance the story, not looking at the negative effects on the league that our best players are moving to Europe. What about the exposure they are getting in Europe? And what about the effect on our various national teams in Africa? Thank you very much. Any question or observation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an observation about your paper. Morocco, like you said, they are very deliberate about their, the use of sports diplomacy. If you observe, whenever CAF is looking to host, a meeting, if it's not held in Cairo, and they needed somebody to sponsor it, they're going to Morocco, Marrakesh or Rabat. So they are very, very deliberate about the use of sport diplomacy. What they want to do is what the Saudis do with their oil money. They use it as a cover for their, bad politics and anti-diplomatic forces. So that's the same thing they are using.
1 minute. Any question, observation? In the absence of the questions of observation. Okay.
Now that's a discussion. Talking to Bright here regarding European football, aligning their time, right? Is it time you talk about?
Yes.
To African time, African football time. I'm like, is it possible for Africa to align their own time to European time? Is that doable?
Thank you. I think I answered that question before, but it is doable. There is an international calendar. In fact, sometimes it's even called FIFA calendar or something. Most seasons across the world, most football seasons start in August, and end in May. But in Africa, many African countries don't follow that pattern. So that's why we have the clash in our tournament and the league. I think we are short of time.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time and for your observations, your questions. It is time for us to call it a day on this panel. Thank you very much.